The storm that night was not the kind you enjoy with a warm drink. It was strong, loud, and scary. I was 16 years old, sitting by my bedroom window. The tall trees in our backyard bent in the wind, moving like they might break. The house was too quiet except for my dad's heavy footsteps downstairs. He had been walking back and forth, listening to the radio, and muttering to himself. "Storms bring bad thing," he said. I did not understand what he meant. Not yet. Our small town was always peaceful. Nothing strange ever happened here. But one person was different. Miss Eliza. Miss Eliza lived near the forest, but she was not really part of the town. She was kind but quiet. She helped sick people with herbal tea and took care of hurt animals. But people in town whispered about her. Some called her a healer. Others said she was a witch. To me, she was just Miss Eliza. She once told me something strange. Snow remembers. It shows where people go, but it can also hide things. I thought she was just being mysterious. But that night, when the storm came and Miss Eliza disappeared, I remembered her words. After dark, someone knocked on our door. Bang, bang, bang. My dad opened it. It was Mr. Carroll, the man who owned the general store. His face was pale and his coat was covered in snow. His voice shook as he spoke. "It's Eliza? She's gone." Dad's face changed. "Gone?" Carol nodded. "Her chimney stopped smoking hours ago. I went to check, and she wasn't there, but there was blood in the snow." The words "blood in the snow" made my skin feel cold. I ran downstairs, but my dad turned to me. "Stay here," he ordered. Of course, I didn't listen. I grabbed my coat, my boots, and a flashlight. Then I followed the group of men who had gathered to search. Outside, the storm hit us like ice. The wind was so strong it felt like tiny knives cutting my face. Our boots sank into the deep snow, making it hard to walk. But we kept moving. Soon we reached Miss Eliza's cabin. Usually her house looked warm and safe, with smoke coming from the chimney. But tonight it was dark and lifeless. The front door was open. Snow had blown inside, covering the floor. Dad stepped in first. "Eliza," he called. Silence. The room was a mess. A table was broken. Shattered glass was on the floor. No fire in the fireplace. But it was the footprints outside that made everyone stop. Two sets of tracks led into the dark forest. One set was small, like Miss Eliza's. The other was big, and drag marks were in the snow. And then we saw the blood. My dad's face became serious. He motioned for everyone to follow the tracks. We moved through the dark forest. The snow crunched under our feet. The trees stood tall and silent, like they were watching us. Then we found her. Miss Eliza was sitting against a tree, half buried in the snow. Her face was tilted up, as if she was looking at the sky. Snowflakes covered her hair and eyelashes. She looked peaceful, but her coat was covered in blood. Dad dropped to his knees beside her. "Eliza?" His voice was shaking. He shook her gently, then harder. She did not move. I stepped back, my heart pounding. That's when I saw it. Behind the tree in the dark, there was a shape. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a bear, but it was too still, too twisted. Then its eyes caught the flashlight. They glowed. It moved, slow and careful. My whole body froze. Then I screamed. The shape vanished into the storm. Its heavy footsteps faded into the wind. No one chased it. No one dared to move. The next day, the coroner said Miss Eliza died from hypothermia. But the men who were there knew better. They had seen the slashes on her coat, the strange footprints in the snow, the thing that was watching us, but no one talked about it, not openly. After that night, the town became quieter. People locked their doors during storms. Parents told their children to never go near the forest. And me? I never forgot the eyes in the dark. Story 2. I was 11 years old when Christmas stopped feeling magical. That was the year my little brother Danny disappeared. It happened on a night when the snow fell heavy from the sky. The streets were white and silent. Our neighborhood was not the kind from Christmas movies. There were no bright lights, no happy songs, just gray houses and cold streets. That winter, the snow kept falling, and the wind howled through the night. Danny was only 5 years old. He believed in magic more than anything. One night, as the wind shook our windows, he whispered to me, "If I ask Santa, he can fix everything. Mom will stop crying, Dad will come home, And you will stop being mad all the time." Hearing him say that hurt. I wanted to tell him that Santa couldn't fix real problems, but he was so small, so hopeful, so I just nodded. "Maybe you're right." Then on a snowy evening, he begged me, "Please, let's go see Santa at the mall." I didn't want to. The weather was too cold. The streets were covered in ice. But Danny's eyes were full of hope. So I sighed and said, "Okay." We put on our thick coats and scarves and walked into the snow. The mall was almost empty. Half the lights were off. The decorations looked old and forgotten. There were no Christmas songs playing. Santa was sitting alone on a small wooden stage. His red suit was faded. His beard was fake and dirty. But his eyes were wrong. They were sharp and dark. They didn't twinkle. They watched people too closely. But Danny didn't notice. He smiled big and ran straight to Santa, ignoring my warning to slow down. I stood back, watching. Santa's voice was deep and rough, like boots crunching on ice. "What do you want for Christmas, little boy?" Danny didn't ask for toys. He didn't ask for candy. "I want my family to be happy again," he said. I felt a tight knot in my stomach. Santa listened. Then he leaned in close and whispered something to Danny. I couldn't hear it, but Danny's face changed. He looked excited, but also scared, like Santa had told him a secret. When Danny stepped off the stage, I asked him, "What did he say to you?" Danny just shook his head. "It's a secret." He held a small red box in his hands. It was wrapped in shiny paper with a silver bow. "What's that?" I asked. "Santa said not to open it yet," Danny whispered. I felt uneasy, but we left the mall and walked home. The storm had gotten worse. The snow swirled around us, making it hard to see. Danny held the box tight against his chest like it was the most important thing in the world. That night, the storm shook our house. Danny sat by the window, staring outside, still holding the red box. "Danny, go to bed," I told him, but he didn't move. "Santa's coming back," he whispered. I didn't sleep much. Then, in the middle of the night, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 soft knocks at the front door. My stomach twisted. I ran to Danny's room, but he wasn't there. His bed was empty. The window was wide open. Snow had blown inside, covering the floor. My heart pounded as I threw on my coat and ran outside. The wind was like ice against my skin. I shouted Danny's name again and again, but my voice vanished in the storm. I ran through the deep snow, my legs heavy and slow. I searched until I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. But Danny was gone. When the storm finally stopped, the police came. They asked questions. They searched everywhere. But they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of him running away. Just the small red box. It was sitting in the snow, right under Danny's window. I picked it up, my hands shaking. I opened it. Inside was a snow globe. The glass was foggy and cold. Inside was a tiny model of our house. I turned it upside down and the snow swirled. For a second, I saw something move. A tiny figure in a red coat, walking between the trees. I threw the snow globe in the trash. But that night, just as I was falling asleep in Danny's room, tap, tap, tap. 3 soft knocks. I froze. Slowly, I peeked through the curtain. Outside in the snow, a figure stood in a red coat. He didn't move. He just waited. I called the police, but when they arrived, he was gone. They said it was stress. They said it was grief, but I knew better. Every Christmas Eve, it happens again. Tap, tap, tap. I look outside, and there he is, still waiting, still watching. I don't know where Danny is. I don't know how this is possible, but I know one thing for sure. Santa is waiting, and next time, he might take me too. Story 3. That night, the snowstorm was the worst I had ever seen. The news called it the storm of the decade. Reporters stood outside, buried in snow, warning people not to go out. But I had no choice. I had been working late at the library, finishing inventory. By the time I stepped outside, the streets were covered in thick snow. The wind screamed through the city. I could have waited inside, but my apartment was only 15 minutes away. A short walk in the snow will be nice, I told myself. At first it was peaceful. The streets were empty. The snow softened all sounds. The only noise was the crunch of my boots. Then I saw him. At first he was just a shape in the snow, a dark figure walking a few blocks behind me. I didn't think much about it. It was a big city. Other people walked in the snow too. But something felt wrong. No matter how far I walked, he stayed the same distance away. He didn't slow down. He didn't speed up. He just followed. My heart started to beat faster. I'm just being paranoid, I told myself. But I turned on to another street to test it. After a few steps, I looked back. He was still there. Same distance, same steady steps. I walked faster. The snow hit my face like tiny needles. Then I saw it, a small cafe with lights still on. I rushed inside. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped in. Warm air hugged me, melting the cold from my skin. There were only a few people inside, a tired-looking barista and a couple in the corner. I ordered a tea and sat by the window. Then I looked outside. He was still there, standing across the street, half hidden in the shadows. He wasn't looking at the cafe, but he wasn't moving either. The barista noticed me watching. "Crazy night to be out, huh?" she said, smiling. I nodded. "Yeah, just trying to get home." But my hands were shaking as I held my tea. I stayed longer than I needed to. I wanted to be sure he was gone. After a while, I took a deep breath and stood up. He'll be gone by now, I thought. But when I stepped outside, I froze. He was closer now, standing on my side of the street, leaning against a lamppost, like he had all the time in the world. I didn't run, but I walked fast. The storm was stronger now. The snow was thicker. The streets looked blurry and unfamiliar. The only sound was my boots crunching and his. He was following me again. I could feel it. I turned a sharp corner, then another, trying to lose him. But when I glanced back, he was still there. Same distance, same steady steps. Then I saw it, a small apartment building. I ran up the steps and grabbed my keys. Maybe he'll just walk past, I thought. I turned to check. He had stopped at the bottom of the stairs, just standing there, watching. I felt my whole body freeze. I gathered all my courage. "What do you want?" I yelled. He didn't answer. He just tilted his head, like he was studying me, like he was thinking about something. Then I ran. I bolted around the building, into the storm. Through the snow, I saw it, an open garage, a mechanic shop, lights still on. I stumbled inside, gasping for breath. A few workers looked up, confused. "Are you okay?" one of them asked. "Someone's following me," I said out of breath. "He's outside." They went to check. I stayed back, my heart racing. When they returned, one of them shrugged. "No one's there." I wanted to believe them. Maybe he left. Maybe I was overreacting. I thanked them and stepped back into the storm. The streets were empty again. I could see my apartment in the distance. Relief flooded my chest. I almost ran up the stairs. I fumbled with my keys. I stepped inside. I locked the door. For the first time that night, I felt safe. Then I heard it, the creak of footsteps above me. My stomach dropped. I froze. Slowly, I looked up, and there he was, standing on the landing, staring down at me. I don't remember running to my apartment, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I locked my door. I shoved a chair under the handle. I called 911. My hands shook as I talked to the operator. Then, a knock. Soft at first, then louder. Bang, bang, bang. I held my breath. Then, silence. I waited, heart pounding. When the police arrived, they searched the building. They found him trying to break into someone else's apartment. They tackled him just as he forced the door open. His screams mixed with the sound of the storm. That night changed everything. Now, whenever it snows, I hear footsteps behind me, and I wonder, is he out there, waiting for the next storm? Story 4. Everyone in town knew about Frostburn House. It sat alone on a hill, far from the rest of the town. Even on sunny days, the house looked scary. People said the wind howled louder around it. Some believed it was cursed, but no one dared to go near it, except me. I had always been curious, and the more people told me, "Don't go there," the more I wanted to go. So on a night when the snowstorm locked everyone inside, I decided, this is the perfect time. I called my cousin Jude and told him my plan. You want to go there? In this weather? Are you crazy? He asked. I smiled. No one will see us. It's just a house. After a long argument, Jude agreed. He brought his friend Lyra. I brought my best friend Theo. The four of us walked through the storm toward the house. Snow crunched under our boots. The wind was sharp against our skin. It felt like a long walk through the Arctic. Then we saw it. Frostburned house. The storm had almost buried the house in snow. Icicles hung from the roof like teeth. The windows were dark, like empty eyes. The whole house leaned, like it was too tired to stand. Lyra took out her phone to snap a picture. Click. But when she looked at the screen, her camera froze. Great, my phone's acting weird, she muttered. Theo shivered. We made it to the creepiest place ever. Can we leave now? But I was already at the front door. I grabbed the handle. It was ice cold. With a loud creak, the door swung open. A strong gust of wind blew past us, as if the house had just exhaled. We stepped inside. It was colder inside than outside. Snow had crept through the broken windows. The wallpaper was peeling, hanging like dead skin. The air smelled damp, like something had been rotting for years. A grand staircase stood in front of us. The banister was cracked, leaning to the side. So, cozy, Jude joked, shining his flashlight around. We split up. Theo stayed close to me. In the living room, the fireplace was black with soot. A rocking chair sat in the corner, creaking slightly in the wind. In the dining room, the table was still set. Plates, forks, candlesticks, all covered in dust and frost. It was like someone had left in the middle of dinner and never returned. And on the walls, the frost looked strange. The ice wasn't random. It had formed shapes, swirling patterns, like someone had drawn them with their fingers. I shivered. Then I heard it. A noise, thud. A single heavy footstep. We froze. Thud. Then another. Slow. Heavy, coming from upstairs. We are not alone, Lyra whispered. Theo grabbed my arm. Let's leave. Now. I should have listened, but something pulled me forward. We followed the sound down the hallway. A door stood at the end. I placed my hand on the knob. It was ice cold. The door creaked open. The room was freezing, colder than the rest of the house. And then, in the corner, I saw it. A figure. A small girl sat on the floor, wearing a tattered dress. Her arms were wrapped around her knees. She looked sad, alone. I stepped closer. Hey, are you okay? Then she lifted her head. I gasped. She had no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin where her face should be. I stumbled back. My flashlight fell from my hands, rolling across the floor. The light hit the walls. Deep scratches were carved into the wood. Leave now! Don't come back! Behind me, Theo shouted my name. Bang! The door slammed shut. The girl stood up. Her movements were sharp, unnatural. Then a voice echoed in the room, but it didn't come from her. You shouldn't have come. Theo and Jude broke the door open. I ran past them, down the stairs, my heart pounding. The wind screamed through the broken windows. The house felt alive. We didn't stop running until we were far from the house. The storm swallowed our footprints behind us. We never looked back. Later, I learned the truth. Years ago, a family had lived in Frostburn House. During a blizzard, they got trapped inside. Their youngest daughter, Abigail, disappeared. Some said she froze to death in the house. Others whispered something worse happened. I don't know what the truth is, but I do know one thing. She's still there, waiting. Story 5. My grandfather had a small cabin deep in the woods. It was far from town, surrounded by tall, dark trees. Every winter, my family went there to escape the city. It was peaceful, quiet, safe. But one year, during a terrible snowstorm, I found something. Something I should have never touched. A small bell buried in the snow. And that's when everything changed. That winter, the snow was heavier than ever. I was 14 years old, bored and restless. One afternoon, I decided to walk outside. The snow was deep, but I liked the silence of the forest. Then I saw it. Something shiny in the snow. I brushed the snow away and picked it up. It was a small, silver bell. It looked old, but perfectly clean. When I shook it, it made no sound. That should have been my first warning. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it. Ding, ding, ding. A soft bell ringing outside the cabin. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then, footsteps, crunching slowly through the snow. Someone was walking outside. I sat up quickly and looked at the window, but all I saw was darkness. The trees stood still. The snow was silent again. I told myself it was my imagination. I closed my eyes. Then right outside my window, ding, ding, ding. The next morning I checked outside. The snow was smooth and untouched. No footprints, no signs of anyone there. I told my grandfather. He frowned. "Did you touch anything in the woods?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "What did you take?" "Just a bell," I said. His face turned pale. "Put it back. Now." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but his eyes were serious. "Some things are not meant to be taken." That night I heard it again. Ding, ding, ding. Closer this time. Then, knocking on the door. Knock, knock, knock. I held my breath. Ding, ding, ding. I ran to my grandfather's room. "Someone's outside!" He grabbed his shotgun. We stepped onto the porch. The night was silent. The snow was perfect and smooth. No footprints. No sign of anyone. The next morning, my grandfather made me take the bell back. I walked through the woods, heart pounding. I placed the bell exactly where I found it. Then I whispered, "I'm sorry." That night, I didn't hear the bell or the footsteps, just the sound of the wind in the trees. We left the next day, but as we drove away, I heard it one last time. Ding, ding, ding. Software far away, like a warning, like a goodbye. Story 6. The snowstorm started faster than I expected. One minute, the streets were clear. The next, the wind was howling and snow was falling thick. I had just left a small coffee shop, heading home. It was late, and the streets were empty. I should have left earlier, I thought. I pulled my coat tighter and walked faster. That's when I got the notification. New match. I had signed up for a dating app a few days ago, just for fun. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but when I checked the screen, I stopped walking, because the profile picture looked familiar. It was me. My heart pounded. I opened the chat message. Stranger. Cold night, huh? Me. Who is this? No reply. I looked around. The streets were empty, but I felt watched. I started walking again, faster this time. Snow covered everything. I could barely see ahead. Then, another message. Stranger. You should be careful. My stomach dropped. I looked behind me. At first, I saw nothing. Then in the distance, a figure in a dark coat, standing under a streetlight, not moving, watching. I turned a corner. Me. Leave me alone. Stranger. You left the cafe so fast. I froze. Whoever this was, they had seen me. I didn't reply. I just ran. I saw a small bookstore with lights on. I rushed inside, breathing hard. An old man behind the counter looked up. You okay? He asked. Someone is following me, I whispered. He nodded slowly, as if he already knew. I peeked through the window. The street was empty again. Was I imagining things? Then my phone buzzed again. Stranger. Nice hiding spot. I dropped my phone. The message had no location, no timestamp, just those words. Bang! The bell above the door jingled. Someone had just walked in. I didn't turn around. I just ran through the back door into the alley. Snow hit my face as I ran home. I locked my door tight. My hands shook as I deleted the app. The messages disappeared. But I knew. They weren't really gone. Someone had seen me. And in this city full of strangers, one of them still is. Story 7. I worked as a pizza delivery guy. The pay wasn't great, but it helped me pay my bills. One night during a heavy snowstorm, I got a weird order. A single large cheese pizza. Nothing strange about that. But the address, 19 Blackwood Street. I had never heard of that place before. I checked the GPS. There was no such street, but the app accepted the order. Must be a new road, I thought. So I grabbed the pizza and drove into the snow. The streets were empty. Snow fell heavy, making it hard to see. I followed the GPS until I reached a narrow road. There was no street sign, no houses, just dark trees on both sides. This doesn't feel right, but the GPS said to keep going. So I did. After a few minutes, I saw it. A small house standing alone in the snow. The windows were dark, no lights, no signs of life. But the app said, "You have arrived." I parked, grabbed the pizza, and walked to the door. Knock, knock, no answer. I knocked again. Bang! The door swung open by itself. "Hello," I called out. No answer. The house was cold and empty. Then from the darkness, a voice. "Bring it inside." My stomach tightened. "No way. Sir, I can leave it at the door." Silence. Then, "Come in." I took one step inside. The air was freezing. The furniture was old and dusty. But the weirdest part, there were shoes by the door. Many pairs. Like a lot of people lived here. But the house was silent. I put the pizza on the table. "Sir, your pizza is here." I turned to leave. Then I saw it. A dark shape standing in the hallway. Tall, still, watching. My body froze. Then the voice again. "Stay for a while." Nope. I turned and sprinted to the door. But slam! The door shut by itself. "You shouldn't have come." The voice was closer now. I grabbed the handle. Locked. Boom! Footsteps rushed toward me. I didn't think. I kicked the door open and ran. I jumped into my car, heart racing. I hit the gas. The house vanished in my rearview mirror. When I got back to the restaurant, my boss looked confused. "Why did you cancel the order?" I didn't. He turned the screen toward me. Order canceled. No address found. What? I checked the app later. No record of Blackwood Street. No sign of the order. Like it never existed. But I know what I saw. And every time it snows, I wonder, who or what was waiting for me in that house? Story 8. The snowstorm trapped everyone inside. It was late, and I was working my shift at a small roadside diner. Outside, the snow piled up fast. The wind howled like a wild animal. There were only 2 customers left, a truck driver reading his newspaper, and a man in a dark coat sitting at the counter. He was staring at nothing, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup. Then he spoke. "Ever keep a secret for too long?" I froze. Something about his voice felt wrong. I forced a smile. "I guess so." He chuckled softly. "It eats at you, doesn't it?" The truck driver turned a page in his newspaper. The man didn't look at me. "You want to hear a story?" he asked. I didn't answer, but he told it anyway. "It was a night like this," he started. "Snow everywhere, wind screaming. No one around." He stirred his coffee slowly. "I was driving. Long highway. Alone." He tapped his fingers on the counter. "Then I saw someone. A girl, standing on the side of the road." My stomach tightened. "She looked lost," he continued. "So I stopped." The diner felt colder. The truck driver flipped another page. The man's voice dropped lower. "She got in my car." I asked her where she was going. She just smiled and said, "Nowhere." He finally looked at me. His eyes were empty. "You ever drive somewhere and never come back?" I stepped back. "What happened to her?" I asked, my voice shaking. He smiled. A cold, slow smile. "That's the secret, isn't it?" My hands trembled. The truck driver cleared his throat, folding his newspaper. "Storm's bad," he muttered. "Better close up soon?" The man sighed and reached for his wallet. "Yeah, better close up." He placed a crumpled bill on the counter. "Keep the change." Then he stood up and walked to the door. As soon as he left, I grabbed the money. It felt strange in my hands. Then I saw it. On the bill, red ink. Number not ink. A small stain of blood. I looked out the window. The man was already gone, swallowed by the snow. The truck driver watched me. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. I never saw that man again. I don't know who he was. I don't know what he did. But I do know one thing. Some secrets should never be told, and some people should never be found. Story 9. It was a cold winter night when my best friend Theo died. The bar was almost empty. Just a few regular customers drinking slowly. Outside, the snow fell heavy, covering the streets in white. Theo and I sat at the counter, talking about nothing important. Then the door swung open. A man walked in. I didn't know it then, but he came to kill my friend. The man was tall and thin. He wore a dark coat, wet with snow. His face was pale, his hands shaking slightly. He sat at the far end of the bar ordering a drink. For a while, he just watched us. I should have noticed it sooner, but I didn't. Theo laughed, taking a sip of his drink. "One day we'll leave this place," he said. "Somewhere warm, no more snow." I smiled. "Yeah, someday." The man at the end of the bar stood up. He walked toward us. Then he said my friend's name. Theo. Theo's smile disappeared. His face went pale. "I don't know you," Theo said. The man smirked. "Oh, you do?" Before I could react, bang! The man pulled out a knife. It flashed under the bar lights. Theo jumped back, but he was too slow. The blade sank into his chest. The bar exploded into chaos. I grabbed the man's arm, trying to stop him. Crash! We hit a table, knocking over glasses. Someone screamed. The bartender called 911, but it was too late. I fell to my knees beside Theo. Blood soaked his shirt. His eyes blinked fast, struggling to stay open. "You're gonna be okay," I lied. He tried to speak. His lips moved, but his voice was too weak. Then his hand fell still, and just like that, my best friend was gone. The man ran out the door, disappearing into the snow. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They searched for weeks, but they never found him. It was like he had vanished into the storm. After Theo's funeral, I found something. A letter in his apartment. Inside there was only one line. "If something happens to me, look for the man in the black coat." Theo knew this man was coming, but he never told me. I still don't know why he was killed, or who the man was. But every winter, when it snows, I wonder if he's still out there, waiting, watching. Story 10. The office was almost empty that night. Outside, the snowstorm was strong, covering everything in white. Most people had left early, but I had work to finish. Only one other person was still there. Daniel. He sat 2 desks away, typing slowly on his computer. I never liked him. Something about him was strange. But that night, he wasn't just strange. He was terrifying. I was typing when I felt it. Someone was watching me. I looked up. Daniel's eyes were locked on me. He didn't blink, just stared. I forced a smile. "You okay?" He didn't answer, just kept watching. Then after a long pause, he whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, I know. I should go home soon." He shook his head. "Not what I meant." Then he stood up, slowly. His chair made a loud screech against the floor. "Be careful tonight." Then he walked away, disappearing down the hall. I tried to ignore the weird feeling in my stomach, but something felt wrong. I checked my phone, no signal. The snowstorm outside was getting worse. I decided to leave. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the elevator. Ding. The doors opened, and there he was. Daniel, standing inside the elevator, smiling. "Going down?" he asked. I hesitated. Then slowly I stepped inside. The doors closed. The elevator started moving. For a moment it was silent. Then he spoke. "Do you believe in ghosts?" My heart skipped a beat. "Why?" I asked. He grinned. "Because sometimes they never leave." Then the lights went out. The elevator stopped moving. We were stuck. I reached for my phone. Still no signal. Then I heard it. Breathing. Heavy, slow breathing. "Daniel," I whispered. No answer. I turned on my phone's flashlight. He was gone. Bang! Something hit the elevator door. Then a whisper. "You shouldn't have stayed late." The doors suddenly opened. I ran out, heart pounding. When I turned back, the elevator was empty. No sign of Daniel. The next morning I asked about him. The manager looked confused. "Daniel? He hasn't worked here for years." "What?" I gasped. "I saw him last night." The manager frowned. "Daniel used to work late, but he died here, in the elevator." During a snowstorm, I checked my phone again. There was one new message from Daniel. See you next time.